What do college professors expect when new learners come to campus? AI-powered education is next. Well, Casey and I are here, and we have a really important guest to us and to many learners out there and to many professional educational communities. And that is Professor Roberta Freeman. And she is joining us to talk about her experiences with AI. And we're really just going to jump right in and get started, because we always have a limited amount of time and we want to hear her voice. But Professor Freeman, can you tell us what are you expecting from new learners as they come to campus these days?
So, by the way, thank you for having me. I love seeing you too, and I've loved working with you through the years. So a few of the things that I would really love for students to know is that they need to be aware that this is a tool, that AI in any form is a tool. It's not going to replace the work that they have to do. And in fact, they still have to check their work and go through the process. I hope too that high school teachers, especially our concurrent enrollment teachers, will really focus on teaching students how to document AI. Both APA, 7th edition, and MLA now have detailed rules and examples of how to document. And that, I think, is really important to emphasize the ethical issues, which we always have to do. Let me check on my notes. A couple of other things is the idea of students understanding that AI is based on algorithms, and so it's generating things, and that it still has hallucinations, where it just pulls things out of thin air and makes things up, kind of like sometimes our students, and we can do too. But we really have to be conscious of that. So those are some key things. And I hate to ask too much more, because high school teachers are already bombarded with everything they have to teach.
Well, I appreciate that response because, one, I'm a concurrent enrollment instructor, so I like to know, am I preparing the students for their next stage, which is hopefully in your classroom or one similar. But I also appreciate that you acknowledge we have a lot on our plates already. We have the standards that are state mandated and also through the college. And so there's a lot of things that we have to sort of, gamble with and determine, like, is this important and appropriate and necessary? And I think you acknowledge the fact that this is necessary and it is important enough in the ethical sense that we need to teach our students how to use it effectively, not just ignore it, because that's not going to help us with anything. No. But some of the things that I'm curious about as somebody who's been at this teaching gig for a few years, I would say, right? You've had a few years,
I believe it's college level. Yes.
How have you been using AI in your, professional experience, or how have you been including it in your classroom?
I use it every day in every way. And I don't think that teachers always understand how much they're using without even knowing. So, for example, the college for our state uses the D2L Brightspace platform. Within that platform, we're generating grades, we're using surveys, we are using content modules. All of those have a platform and background. In addition, because I teach public speaking, I am recording and storing student speeches. So we're using MediaSpace, Kaltura, and generating captions. All of those are AI generated. Turnitin, AI. Other apps that I have tried are things like YellowDig for discussions. And what that does is help students focus on brevity and tone, and all within AI contents. And then Perusal is another e-reader based on AI. And that's really helpful in getting students to annotate and highlight their research.
I forgot about perusal. I love that. Oh,
Yep.
you're right. That's a really great tool to use for annotation. And
Yes.
I forgot about it until you just mentioned that. I'm going to come back to it.
Good.
So obviously the way that you just discussed it, we hear the advantages. We hear like the really great ways that you're making your content more accessible, that you're getting your students to be more invested and involved in the process that you had mentioned before too, which is one thing that I know Sandra and I always talk about is how is this a part of a process, to the end results. But I think it's important for us also to acknowledge, where have you seen students maybe take advantage of the resources and not maybe perform the most ethical speeches or whatever it might be? How have you seen maybe a disadvantage in your classroom too with the use of AI?
Sure. I think there are a lot of implications. Now, personally, I always try to be as proactive as possible. And I start on day one, talking about AI, talking about plagiarism, and the idea that, yes, ChatGPT is right there for you to experiment with. But I tell them the example of a time, I think a year ago, when I asked students, I gave them a basic topic and said, you go ahead and write a prompt and put that into ChatGPT and see if you can get the correct answer or some semblance of it. And honestly, the majority of the students took so long to do it, they finally gave up and just wrote their own. And I like to tell that to my students up front and say, look, and of course, they will master it and come up with prompts and things. And AI is going to continue to evolve and change. But I do think it's important for them to understand it's still a process and it still takes time and work. So,
well, I know that MSNBC just came out with a poll that said like 10% of educators believe that AI is harming education. And so like the three of us here, I love the fact you start out with, it's about the philosophy day one. It's what you believe day one. It's about, the pedagogy behind the use of no matter what technology it might be, and especially with AI. But we're pretty much saying good things about it, but we're also saying, let's make sure we have that culture with our learners right up front, that we, that we all are in this together and so forth. And then the harm isn't, as deep.
Yeah. I do think that like high school teachers, college faculty are overwhelmed too, that we are all living in an age of information overload 10.0. And there is no way to keep up. And it can be detracting. It can be exhausting. And I believe there are other implications involved.
So we have some research too, right? That you have to share with us. So we're excited to hear about it.
Right. So one of the first caveats, I think, is about equity and accessibility. This semester, I served as the faculty coach in our academic center for writing and reading. And I worked with a lot of students from out of state. And they came from schools where they had never had a keyboarding class. In fact, their schools had a few old broken computers in their computer lab. And so when they come to us, they hunt and peck. They have no idea how to research, let alone document, and all of those things. And I am concerned about furthering the divide. That there are so many schools in this country and around the world that simply do not give students the access. And that makes things, I think, very problematic. I also am concerned about the bias that I see at times. And I know the large language model is really trying to catch up. But I did search one time. I asked for 4 images of elementary school teachers. And I got back 4 images of older white women. And so we're not quite there yet, but I think they'll get smarter. So all of those things are issues, without a doubt. I don't think that students are, I wouldn't say that my students in particular are really thinking of using it as a shortcut. I think they know better. For one thing, in a public speaking class, they have to get up and present the information. And I tell them all the time, and I teach English and comm, that, okay, so you can slip a paper that you wrote the night before under a professor's door, but in comm, you can't slip yourself under the door because you're coming in and going to stand in front of your classmates and deliver, right? You both
Well,
know.
and as a fellow comm teacher and listening, I have listened to speeches that were generated by AI. And it's always comical to me because I think even this year, I'm like, I do a podcast, right? You know that I literally study this in my free time. It's so obvious that those were not your words. Not only did you not know how to pronounce them, but also you did not really understand the context in which you were saying them either. So that's a whole nother host of issues. But, Roberta, I am really curious about some of the work that you have been doing to help sort of our college in the classroom type of experience and helping your students in the accreditation process for your college. Do you want to share some of that work with our viewers?
Sure. Let's see if I can find it. This is what happens when you have a million tabs open. Oh.
The life of a teacher, the tabs are all
exactly.
Mine are different windows now. So within these windows, then I have tabs, and then there's another window
should do that. And I don't want to share just anything because I have. So that's another issue while I'm looking. The idea of data privacy, including FERPA laws and what we're putting in. I also have read some recent things about legal things coming out and copyright, that I did discover that anything generated by AI is not copyrightable.
Right.
And so even if
we talked about that. Yeah.
Oh, good. And even if we use a prompt of our own, like in Microsoft Pilot, it doesn't give us credit, and it erases it, of course, too, which doesn't help. All right, I think I've got it.
Here we go.
Okay. So this is something I've been working on in Tome, which is completely AI generated to come up with presentations. And of course, I use a ton. I think most college instructors usually do, and high school. So I've done this communication assessment this semester, both in my class and with our concurrent. And so when I'm putting in the data, this program is really quite fabulous in that it's very intuitive, and you enter your data and it will arrange things and offer suggestions. Now, I've used PowerPoint for years, and for the most part, I make it do what I want it to do. But this program, the AI part of it really kicks it up a notch and will make my life, I think, much easier. I loved in one of your podcasts when you talked about AI for teachers as an assistant and AI for students as a tutor. And you could probably see from the list I gave you of ways that I use it: Perusal, Yellow Dig, Grammarly, No Red Ink, Turnitin. All of those are really tutors in some ways for students. But this is my newfound friend assistant in putting together data. So I've set it up, explained, what I've done. I've given the instructions that I've sent out. I've explained the ratings, and I love how seamless it was to put this in. And then I've just entered my own data for my students. And I am slowly getting in the data from my concurrent partners. And so I will then, the prompt is to ask them to choose 5 random students to examine their process of writing and speaking through inventing, organizing, drafting, revising, editing, presenting. And then I will compile their data for each school and put that in. And then really look at the discussion and conclusions that I've drawn. And I really think it's so important that the data I've seen so far is maybe not going to be what my students have done.
Mm.
And I understand completely why. And that, by the way, is not going to be true of all in any way. But what I see is all of these things that are happening. I observe hundreds of college concurrent enrollment classrooms. I have yet to sit through a class where there isn't an announcement, or that students are called out, or that students get up and leave because they're leaving for a sporting event, or that half of the class is present and the other class is already gone for an activity. You know, I certainly have heard plenty of stories about school culture, about parental pressure, all of those things. And I think it's so important, as I'm putting together this research, to use AI in a way that helps me aggregate the data, analyze it, synthesize, explain, come to my conclusions, while also using my own empirical evidence to really explain the factors. And once again, we can't use AI just to put together data and research. We still have to explain and put it into context. That's our ethical duty. That's part of the critical thinking.
So powerful. So,
That is.
just to see all those, like you said, hundreds of classrooms in the situation that you're in, and to see, the patterns, the conclusions that you're drawing, and then having your assistant help you aggregate that. Really.
Yeah, I will include a link to the Tome app website that kind of explains the tool itself. I personally love my administrative assistant, beautiful AI. She creates my presentations for me. I just have to put in a long stream of content and I let the AI slides create themselves, and it has saved me an incredible amount of time. It's also given me unique perspectives on how to present data, which I didn't think of. I'm thinking normal graphs or charts, and it shows me some interesting ways to present it. And I love that. And I think Tome must have some similar capabilities for that interactive part. I really appreciate you sharing that. I know we are going to run out of time here. So was there anything that you really wanted our viewers to know and understand about AI in your setting?
Sure. There are 2 other links that I'm not going to show you, but PUPP, P-U-P-P, is through the University of Quebec. And so you can access it in French or English, which I kind of like. But it talks specifically about the plagiarism factor and how to teach students how to be ethical in their AI use, which I think is so important and has a ton of resources. And I am all over that. And then future tools, I don't know if either of you have used, but just again, a ton of research. In fact, or resources. And that's where I found Tome and decided, and I've played with a couple of them there. And so they're all different ways to use AI to make our load hopefully easier, smoother.
Right. And I really love how you said that at the end, where it's play, because a lot of teachers are afraid, whether it's college or student teachers or any level, high school, elementary, they don't want to be afraid. They're afraid of the tool, the AI, whatever it might be. And the word play, that allows us to go out there and give those things a try. And we're just so grateful that you played with us today.
My honor. I've loved this, and I love what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.